This is Hit Rackets Drop 120, or should I say this is my review. So this is the card that comes with it. So its nickname is The Touch, and we're going to see whether it fulfills its name. Let me tell you very briefly about the way this video is going to work. I'm going to start in a moment with my summary so that you don't have to jump to the end to find out. I'm going to tell you what I think about it, what type of player it will be suitable for. Then if you're still interested, then there'll be the other sections which will be testing protocol, methodology that I use to actually test it, and some of the specifications like close-up views and just some general watching me hit the ball and talking about it. So that's how it's going to work. So first of all, I'd like to thank Hit Rackets, who are based in Madrid. Currently, they're not shipping internationally, but if enough people show interest, then they certainly would be interested in doing that. So if after you've seen this review and you're interested, go visit their website and maybe talk to them. So what we got here is we've got a standard shape, and the first thing that you might notice is the difference in color. That's one of the cool things about this. And the card that it comes with has got those color combinations like on the back there, but you've got the same. You can see that it's got the green and it's got this kind of orange, dark orange. So that's very cool. So visually, it's very clear from the beginning that this belongs to them. It comes with a fairly good looking string. We'll talk about strings a bit later. And it's supposed to be 120. Now, it's not 120 because no racket is 120. What 120 is without the strings and without any types of grip on. But that's fine, I'm not worried about that. I found this racket to be initially a little unforgiving, and by unforgiving, and hopefully what other reviewers mean by unforgiving, is when it hit outside of what would be considered the sweet spot. The sweet spot is the perfect place to hit the ball. It didn't really respond very well, but that was only initially. I'll talk about the protocol a bit later, but I did start with 1,000 or more side-to-side shots to allow the racket to, the phrase in English is bed in, which is basically just become comfortable. Remember, any review that you see, you are actually reviewing the racket, the string, and the tension combination. So when I talk about the racket, I'm talking about those three things, okay? So when I first started hitting with it, if I got it right in the center, it was like, oh, okay, this is really nice. Anything outside, not so good. But that did change. After the first 1,000 shots or so, I found that it was much more forgiving. It's still not as forgiving as other rackets on the market, but that's okay, and I'll mention that in a moment. So my first thing that I noticed was that once I started slicing the ball, this racket responded really, really well. And what was interesting about that was the sound. Now, all rackets make sound when you hit the ball, but this one almost told you, as if you hadn't felt it, almost told you like, in a special way. I can't even make the sound now, sorry to be so stupid, but when you hit it with slice and it was just in the right place, it sounded fantastic. It was really like a confirmation of the feeling you get when you hit the ball. Yeah, you've hit this ball really well. That's not to say that it sounded bad when it was outside of the sweet spot. It just sounded really nice when you hit it. So that was a strange thing, that slicing the ball made this racket respond really well, and I felt that I had a lot of control. This racket works incredibly well on the volley as well, which was quite a surprise because normally lighter rackets, they're not so good on the volley because you've got less swing, you've got less momentum, and it requires the racket to do the work. But this racket does the work. Let me be clear, this is not a power-based racket. If you are looking for a racket to smack the ball as hard as you can, this is not the racket for you. If you are looking for a racket that allows you to use your good technique and control, then this could be the racket for you. I'm not saying you can't hit the ball hard. I mean, I did hit the ball hard and I felt very comfortable hitting the ball hard, but this racket works best when you're trying to control the ball. So the slice was really a noticeable thing, and then when I moved on to the volley, I found that I was volleying really, really well. Now, what I did notice is when I moved to the back of the court and I started hitting lengths, this racket improved my backhand, which was like a little bit weird because one racket shouldn't change the way one type of swing works. So I was like, yeah, okay, my backhand today is just, really good and my forehand's not so good. So I went outside of the court, I got a racket that I normally use, the one that I've been practicing with for the last few months, and I used that, and no, my backhand was the same as it was on the forehand that day. Went back to this racket, and yes, my backhand was better. And that's weird, right? So what did I attribute it to? Well, I attributed it to the fact that I put a lot more slice on my backhand than I do on my forehand. And because this racket seems to work really well with slice, I was like, okay, maybe that combination works really well. Now, I'm not suggesting that if you buy this racket, your backhand will improve. What I am suggesting is if you play with a lot of slice, this racket might suit you. Now, because I've been sponsored for all of my coaching career, I haven't bought rackets. I haven't bought very many rackets. And what that means is that I'm not shy when the ball is close to the wall. If the ball is close to the wall, I'm just going to hit it. Now, this racket has been hit against the wall significantly hard quite a few times. I didn't smack it against the wall just on purpose because that would be like stupid. But what I did do is when the ball was close to the wall and my racket hit the wall, it hit it. And it's sustained no obvious damage. I'm confident that this racket seems to be quite strong, so that's another good feeling. So this racket will generate power if you have good technique. It will give you a lot of feel if you like to volley and you like to slice. Now that's not to say that when I was playing lots of drops, I couldn't hit nice drops. I could. I'm just trying to emphasize the characteristics. As I played more and more with it, I found that it was a little more forgiving, and that could simply be the strings just becoming a little bit slightly looser and being more evenly distributed tension-wise. This area here is less forgiving than this area here, and that's exactly the way it should be, because I don't need to hit the ball here, but I do need to hit the ball here. When the ball is touching the wall or literally touching the wall and I come along here, I'm gonna have to make contact here. And that for me is a big aspect. This racket felt very nice when I'm playing the ball tight to the wall. Not necessarily as good as when I hit it in the middle, of course not, no racket is, but I never felt that that was an issue. So that's the summary. If you're a player who has good technique, and likes to play with touch, slice and volley, this is a fantastic option for you. So hopefully that's given you an idea of how I feel about it. I've got another grip on top from the standard one because that's normal as well. So if you're interested in all of the sort of other aspects, the protocol, the close-ups and all of those things, stay tuned for those and I'll be talking about them. This is not me during the actual testing, just a recreation. I don't like to focus on camera angles and worrying about recording when I'm testing. I probably hit the ball between 4.5, maybe even 5 hours. That includes a length game session of 40 minutes with somebody, which is not shown here because I didn't have my recording equipment with me at the time. The first thing I did was over 2,000 side-to-side shots. Now I know 2,000 is a lot, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to just become accustomed to the feel of the racket just hitting the ball. No particular type of shot, just the solid hitting. As I mentioned in the intro, initially, I found the racket quite unforgiving, but as the strings became a little bit looser and I became more accustomed to the exact position where I needed to hit the ball, it began to feel much more comfortable. By the end of it, I was really quite happy with the way this racket responded. I then moved on to hitting the ball in the back corner, up and down the wall, the standard type thing you do when you're on your own. I found the racket easy to maneuver, no problem when the ball was very close to the wall. It slides along quite nicely. I found no problem when the ball is deep into the corner. If you drop the grip and you try to get the ball out of the corner from very tight situations, the racket had enough power and control for me to be able to bring it more or less to the back. At the end of it, I was more than happy feeling that I could take the ball out of the corner and put it anywhere I wanted. I did practice a few boasts, I did practice a few cross courts, but of course when you're on your own that's not exactly the same as playing with somebody else. But it still felt able to change the speed of the ball, change the direction with plenty of control. Next up were volleys, and there were plenty of volleys from all situations on the court, from the back to the back, from the back to the front, from the middle to the middle, from the middle to the front, right up at the front as well. I'm not showing all of the different types, but take my word for it. I played lots of volleys in all situations. One of my favourite volley routines is the figure of 8 with the alternate straight volleys. I really feel that this allows me to see how a racket works in changing the direction of the ball off cross courts, and that's a key thing for many squash players. This racket responded well in all situations, especially in that figure of 8 one I've just mentioned. I found that even though the racket's not very heavy, I didn't have to put much effort into hitting the ball cleanly. If you time the ball well with this racket, you will get some really sweet returns. And I mentioned the sound of the racket in the intro, and I actually noticed it most on these volleys. When the timing was just right and you put a little bit of slice, you got this really nice kind of ping or tinge to the sound, and it was a really nice confirmation that I've hit the ball sweetly and cleanly. I'd already done some volley kills, so now it was time for some just pure kills from the bounce, and I found that the slice worked really nicely on this. If I hit the ball flat, I could still hit it into the nick most of the time. I could still hit it cleanly, but as I keep saying, it responded really well on the slice. And in fact, if I think about it, I think I got a better response on the forehand slice killing the ball than I did on the backhand. That could just be on the day or what I remember. It might not be a fair representation. But I was able to hit the ball hard, hit the ball with slice, and hit the ball accurately. I then moved on to the softer, shorter drops, kills, pushes type shots, and I played those again in all variety of situations. And I didn't need to slice the ball so much in this case because of course I'm not swinging so fast, I'm not hitting it so hard, but it still responded well. I was still able to push the ball with very little movement of the racket head. Again, I need to time the ball well because that's important with this particular racket, and by timing I mean it needs to be in the right place on the racket. But I felt as though I had a lot of control, both forehand and backhand, from high, from low. It was a nice racket to play counter drops with because I can maneuver the racket head quite well. All in all, I was very comfortable at the front of the court. What I did for this test was I purposefully mishit it. Now I'm not really sure how well that comes across in the video, but normally when you're hitting the ball, you're trying to hit it in the perfect sweet spot. You're just trying to find the right distance that you need to get it because you want it to hit it really cleanly. But in this test, I was trying to do the exact opposite. I was trying to hit it near the frame, not on the frame, but near the frame, from the sides, from the top and the bottom, because I wanted to get a feel for how it responded to perhaps beginners who don't time the ball well, or for days when I'm not hitting the ball so cleanly. And I don't want to sound too negative because no racket works perfectly when you hit it outside of the sweet spot, but this one felt as though it was constantly saying to me, look, I'll hit the ball for you, but really go back to the center, go back to the sweet spot. So this reinforces my feeling that this racket is for a person who has good technique, has been playing at least a little while, and can consistently hit the ball in the sweet spot. It wasn't horrible to hit it outside of the sweet spot, but it certainly wasn't one of the racket's best features. And the final test in my testing protocol and methodology was actually using my left hand. Now I'm right-handed, so using my left hand is a way for me to get some kind of feeling what it would be like for a beginner to play with this racket. And it's very similar to the mishits, but not exactly the same, because even when you hit the ball in the sweet spot and you're playing with your wrong hand, we'll call it, the hand that you don't normally play with, you can still hit the ball cleanly, but it was not a racket that responded well to anything outside of that sweet spot. It's nice and light and it's well balanced, so that's good from a technical point of view because it allows me to keep my technique because it's not too heavy, it's not stressing my forearm, but still it was not a racket that I thought, this is really nice to hit with this ball. Let's move on to the specifications, which for some people are really important. In my eagerness to get hitting with the ball, I couldn't wait for the delivery of my scale, so you'll see that these things happened after I'd been hitting with the ball and I had to take the grip off. The weight of the racket is 150.5 grams, as is supplied by the manufacturer. With the extra grip that I'm put on top, which I always need to do, and you probably do too, and that's a good thing, it was 162.5. Now I say it's a good thing because it's better that the manufacturer supplies rackets with slightly smaller grips because it's so much easier to put another grip on to find the right size. Imagine if they put too many grips on at the beginning or too big a grip, making it smaller would be really difficult. The extra grip, of course, changes where the balance point is, and the balance point without the grip is 345 millimeters, and with the grip it's 330. You'll have to do the calculations to compare it with other things, because I'll be perfectly honest with you, these things don't particularly interest me at all. When I pick up a racket, it's how it feels. Now, of course, I can tell a difference between head light and grip heavy, or grip light, shall we call it. But what's important is not the actual number, how it feels to me. The grip that's supplied with the racket, like nearly all grips nowadays, is very basic, but as I've just mentioned, that's not a problem because I've got to put another grip on top anyway. The strings that are supplied are very basic ones, not the same ones that you can buy from their website, very basic ones strung at 11 kilograms, which for me is a little bit tight. They're not the greatest strings that you'll ever get in a racket, but that's okay as well because I don't really want expensive strings in a racket because they won't be strung at the tension that I want, and then I'll be paying for something extra that I don't really want. I prefer to have basic strings in a racket, play with it until it breaks, and then I'll put my strings in at the tension that I really like. So let's talk a little bit about Hit Rackets, because it's probably not a brand that you've ever heard of. They've been selling rackets since around 2010, and they're run by a gentleman who used to be a very high level squash player, Madrid champion for a number of years, in the top 5 in the Spanish ranking. If we just have a quick look at the website, you can see that they've essentially got 3 models. They're available in 2 different weights. So they've gone for a simplified model structure and given you a choice of weights. They also sell shoes, clothing, and other, strings and grips and things like that, even their own ball machine. Currently, most of their business is in Spain, but they would be willing to send outside of Spain if you show an interest. So if that's something you're interested in, contact them. Don't worry about having to contact them in Spanish. The gentleman who runs the site has beautiful English. In fact, he coached in England for a few years, so you'll be able to communicate with no problems at all. The least you can do is go check out their site and see what they've got available, and if something interests you, contact them. If you think the content of my videos is useful, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on notifications. This is a playlist of the technical aspects of squash, which probably interests you if you've watched this video. This is a video that YouTube thinks is a really good fit for you. Thanks for watching, and remember, do something every single day to improve your squash. See ya!